I guess now you can see my screen, hopefully,
Yes.
in the presentation mode.
Yes.
So, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Hasan, and I'm also a PhD student in the University of Siegen, working with Gabor, Christian, Reza, and the other colleagues also in the OSCAR project. And what I'm going to talk about is how the eDoer system is meant to be used for this healthy research career development that we are working on in the OSCAR framework. Now, when OSCAR framework is mentioned and in connection to eDoer, the questions that come to mind: what is so special about this particular framework to be presented in such a workshop about the eDoer system? And why the ideas from OSCAR and eDoer are meant to complement each other? And when that happens, how exactly this integration between the two can happen? To answer those questions, I will boil the matter down to 2 points. The first one is soft skills that are handled in the OSCAR framework. And the other one is the communication part. So OSCAR framework is meant to develop healthy career, and development of a healthy career is not, let's say, in contrast to developing a skill in technical domain like learning about Python or programming or machine learning and so on. Soft skills themselves have different nature. If we talk about stress management or conflict management, these are skills that are difficult to learn from a file. I cannot say that I can read a PDF or watch a video and then now I can handle my stress better. So the nature of the materials that are being recommended as non-technical materials that are targeting the development of soft skills of the early research or early career researchers is the first challenge that faces automatic recommendation systems in this regard. What we see now, the most common format of teaching those skills is by training. And it's very common that a trainer or a coach can have one-on-one or perhaps some training workshops to present those skills and enable the learners of actually getting the benefit and practicing, which is a point that also has been mentioned in the question, that such skills require practice in order to master and gain. And this brings us to the second point, which is the communication. This communication to an actual coach, to a coach or a mentor, is extremely important. And it's highlighted also in the OSCAR framework that these communications are key in order to learn and master this skill and also assess that you have actually gained this skill or not. Between these 2 points in the OSCAR project, the role of eDoer is to build a link that can provide learners with soft skill recommendations as non-technical materials and yet enable an effective communication and contact to the mentors. This is the role of eDoer, but what is actually OSCAR about and what are those skills? OSCAR is a framework that is based on 3 main pillars: mental well-being of early career researchers, the career management abilities and coaching for those researchers, and intelligent recommendations of those non-technical skills. All in all, this framework represents an online and open learning recommendation platform for mentors and learners to communicate each other towards sustainable research career, to reduce the mental burden on the researchers in their early career, and also to support them with mentoring and coaching along this process. Starting with the first point, the mental well-being, it is developed, and I will go very quickly on those 2 parts of the OSCAR framework. The mental well-being is being developed by our psychologists, psychological experts to cover the main points that reflect how the mental state of mind or state of mind of an early career researcher would be, including the emotions, the behavior and agency, social connections and communications with their peers and with their work environment, the self-concept and how they are actually managing their self-concept of their careers and about their situation at work, and also the purpose and meaning of the work that they are doing, the research work that they are doing. With these mental well-being parts, the career of the researcher is the main concern, not the private, right? In contrast to the private life, I mean. And here comes the second pillar of OSCAR framework, which is the career management. And it's built on the career motivation for this specific job that the researcher is doing. The career management itself and development, career change, how to invoke this change in the work that you are doing, and so on. And then the future skills that can support the researcher in managing, for example, the stressful situations, the conflicts in their career, and so on. Now, with these two pillars, the automatic or the technical part of the framework is represented by these intelligent recommendations. And the intelligent recommendations are meant to provide the learners with a non-technical recommendations from the two other pillars. It's meant to connect them to the mentors, to store their progress and learning path that they have followed in order to analyze and also gain some results from, as has been presented earlier, how these skills are also recorded, and then take into account and this is one of the most important points, take into account these academic and psychological factors in the learning process and not neglecting them, especially when we are talking about skills like the non-technical skills. With this framework, the question now, how it can be integrated with eDoer, and what is the role of eDoer in actually making this a reality? And to talk about this, I am going to focus on the technical framework of the OSCAR project, which is implemented mainly on eDoer. So in the framework, we have the learners and the mentors as the main users of the overall system. And then on the other hand, we have the system itself, which is represented by the eDoer platform. The learners and the users interact with the system through the website that has been presented in the previous two presentations, where you have seen the details and how the learner can actually get those skills, learn them, and give a feedback on them. Now, the core of this whole process is the recommender system, how to generate those recommendations. And in the OSCAR project, or within the OSCAR framework, the recommendations are meant to be a graph-based recommendations. The underlying structure would be a knowledge graph that interlinks those users with the learning materials and try to generate semantically reasonable or valid recommendations. The recommendations in such an environment are not just videos or text PDF. They are, of course, the learning material to read or watch, but they also include other parts of the recommendation, such as recommending learning path to reach a complex skill, which you cannot get by watching one video or seeing one PDF. Then the recommendation would generate several steps that the learner can follow in order to reach this skill. Testing and exercises are also recommended in order to practice this skill that you have tried to learn. Actions, learning actions are also important. For example, in some of the cases, you can get a recommendation of learning a certain skill, and then an action that tells you, for example, to contact the mentor in order to evaluate what is the level of mastery you have reached in this skill. And this here with this idea, you can see how the other pillars, the mental well-being and the career development pillars, are influencing the technical system and the technical framework into towards this human connection and towards the real validation and mastery of those non-technical skills. To be able to recommend those non-technical skills effectively and actions to the learners, the recommender system requires two main points. The first one is a model about the user. For recommendation, we need to understand the person that we are providing the recommendation to, in this case, the learner, and we need to understand the recommendation itself. What is the item that we are recommending? So the first part is the user profile. And with our psychological experts, we have developed a framework of the user profile that reflect three main pillars: the behavioral aspects, the interests, and the intentions. Behavioral aspects in terms of the academic paths that they have followed, the skills that they have learned, and so on, and the psychological construct, the state of mind of this learner along this path. The interest is reflected by what preferences they have, and you have seen in the platform how the learner can choose different modes of preferences for the materials that they are learning, and so on. And the final intention is the goal. What is the goal of actually gaining this, getting this recommendation? What is the skill that I'm targeting? With a clear user profile, the recommender can actually understand how to build a personalized recommendation based on all these factors in the user, that represent the user themselves. The other important point for the recommender is the material itself. And here comes the learning material representation. Representing this learning material very well, like for example, understanding its content and quality from the metadata and so on. It's extremely important for the recommender to personalize the recommendations. In the OSCAR framework, we have the final target is the skill. And this skill is gained by several knowledge topics, which can be learned by educational resources, such as files, PDF files, or videos, and so on, and also tests and exercises. This also reflects on the fact that in some non-technical skills, the practice is more important, or is very important. The learning material is developed also on an ontological framework to represent those learning materials and connect them to the user profile and the recommender system itself. What also is needed for this overall system is the quality of this material, which has been discussed in detail by Reza. The crowdsourcing algorithm, which enables the first step of communication between the learners themselves and also the learners and the experts. And this happens through providing their feedback about the material, their suggestions about new skills and new topics for each skill, and so on. And so here you can see that the first block of building this intercommunication in the platform starts with the crowdsourcing. Of course, the recommender itself to build a personalized recommendation requires also the psychological constructs from the user profile. And this is supported by, or will be supported, so it's in the plan for development, by a user mood acquisition. And this mood is meant to reflect the psychological constructs for each time you use the system. As we have mentioned or before about this communication part. So now we try with the user profile to understand the user, with the learning material representation to represent it in a way that reflects the requirements of a non-technical and soft skill learning materials. What's needed now is the communication part. And for that, the first step started with the crowdsourcing through building this feedback communication part. And the next is to build a communication channel that actually connects the learners with the mentors through the system itself. And this is also planned to be developed within the OSCAR framework, the technical framework of OSCAR, in order to support these recommendations. As I have mentioned, one of the recommendations might be actually contacting an expert in the field to get valid assessment of your current situation, for example, or advice from a real human, because the technical system will not be and is not meant to be to replace the human expert. It is meant to support the human expert, the mentor, in reaching larger numbers of learners instead of limited trainings for 20, 30 people, for example. And here the system also should play an important role in communicating those learners and mentors to ensure a sound psychological and healthy development of the career. With these parts of the technical framework, I will end up with the development plan. So the development process that has already started recently with OSCAR within the OSCAR project, and continuing to cover those points that have been mentioned, started mainly with the first steps of developing the system itself, like you have seen in the previous presentations, and now it also went for representing the educational materials, for which the colleagues in the project have been working effectively into producing the first ontology, which I'm glad to announce that it has been now, let's say, finalized, which is the eDoer ontology, the educational ontology for career-oriented recommendations. And this ontology is meant to link the representation of open educational resources and educational resources with the recommendations, and also with the user profile that take into account the psychological and academic parameters in order to provide more sound recommendations to the user. And those are also directly connected to the job market skills. So the ontology tries to build all these components together in one representation that can be the foundation of a sound recommendation. The next point that has also been worked on very intensively is the crowdsourcing and chat functions that are included currently in the tool to provide feedback about the materials that you have learned, or if you have suggestions about new skills and new materials for that. And now the upcoming the upcoming tasks is building a full knowledge graph and the graph-based recommendations upon the developed educational ontology. This knowledge graph will interconnect the materials with their skills and with the users in order to generate graph-based recommendations that reflect also the next step of semantic recommendations of these soft skills. Also, in the plan for the development is the full communication to mentors. Currently, we have this chatting functionality that provides feedback from the user, and through the accumulative feedback from the crowd, the system can enhance its performance. The next step is to build the communications directly to the mentors, enabling, for example, talking to a mentor through the platform, getting their advice, setting, for example, a meeting for a personalized one-on-one discussion, and so on. And with these development steps, hopefully the technical framework will reach the level where it can actually fulfill the requirements of providing recommendations of those non-technical skills, soft skills, and supporting them with the mentor supervision and the mentor connection, so that the mentor can actually help in assessing the parts that the system cannot assess automatically. For example, the mastery of a certain non-technical skill, like the communication skill, and also support in building more sustainable career and more healthy development in the researcher career. With this point, I will thank you all for attention, and will be glad to answer any questions.
Yes, thanks a lot, Hasan. And I think what is really exciting in this OSCAR project is really this human touch of recommendations. So there, in the world of recommender systems, there are close to 0 applications available, which really considers like what a mental state a learner is, and assign recommendations to that mental state. So I'm really looking forward. The project we just started. So basically what you have seen is the result of the first 6 months of work. So soon we will start implementing all these elements what Hasan mentioned in the system. So any questions at this stage for Hasan? Ellen?
Sorry, I'm having trouble with the mute button today. No, it's another statement really. There's some tools already out there that do parts of what you're talking about. In the Aperio Foundation, there's a tool called Student Success Plan, which is does the mentor communication quite well and is linked up to learning analytic algorithms. So I would say have a look what's already out there, because there is some stuff out there for little bits of what you're doing. So that's just feedback.
Can you please the name of the tool in the chat if it's possible, so that I don't miss the name.
So yeah, I'm having trouble understanding you, Hasan. Sorry.
No problem. If it's possible to write the name of the tool in the chat, I would really appreciate it.
Yep.
But I also read it.
Yep, I do that, and perhaps we can talk about it. I very much like your knowledge graphs.
Hasan, you sound a bit like Darth Vader, but it's probably, I don't know, something maybe with your internet connection or your microphone. Maybe you can have a quick look. So Long, are there any further questions at this stage? Okay, no questions then. Yeah, thanks a lot, Hasan, for this summary.